Hi, welcome back. I am so excited to bake some sourdough with y'all this week. So I have another video this week on how to start a sourdough starter. So if you're new to sourdough in general, or you just want to see if there's another way to start sourdough, I'm telling you the easy, simple, proven way that works for me. There is about 1,000 ways to start a starter. And some people make it very technical and scientific and a little bit tricky. I love non-complicated things. I want to bring to you simplicity and delicious real food that's good food. So watch that video if you feel so inclined. And today we're going to be making just your everyday sandwich loaf sourdough. We're going to start with something very basic, but I find it's really good to start with the basics so that anything you do from the basics, adding in different kinds of flour like rye or whatever to get different flavors, if you have your baseline, you know what a base should be, then it's easier to build from there, to branch out and try different things. So you know, start here and then go from there. So today it's just simple. But I wanted to talk with you a little bit about why we would choose to do sourdough over just a regular yeasted bread, because it is a little bit more tricky and it takes a bit more time than your regular yeast dough bread, like our basic bread dough recipe we've been baking together for a while. It takes, what, an hour rise, then shape it a half hour, and then bake it a half hour. So it's 2 hours, done and dusted. You have three delicious loaves of bread. So sourdough is different in that it takes a lot longer because we're using a starter, not a commercial baking yeast. The commercial baking yeasts have only been around for 200 years, so everything in history, bread rise that's risen, has been a sourdough starter. And it's a little bit healthier for your gut because it really is fermenting, and we know that fermented foods are going to help our guts, and our overall body health comes from our guts, right? So as much fermented food as we can get in there, good. So sourdough is, in general, better to eat because you're eating a fermented food. But also, what we're doing is capturing the wild yeast and bacteria that's in the air, and we're growing it, and the strongest ones are surviving, and that's what's going to live in your starter. So then when you bake with your starter, you have all this delicious natural yeast and bacteria in the air. They're going to get into your dough, and they're going to start eating the fiber and the gluten and the, everything that's in there. They're going to eat it and digest it, and they're going to pass through those nutrients. So they're broken down even a bit more than just your basic yeasted bread. So you're getting, from using freshly milled flour, all this amazing nutrient. It's been digested, so it's broken down into easier to eat pieces. So it's even easier for our bodies to digest the nutrients that are in regular old, like freshly milled flour. They now have become post-digested into better particles for us to ingest, right? Also, when the yeast and the bacteria are eating, they're producing probiotics that actually we get the benefit of eating. So we're getting more easily digestible nutrients. We're also getting probiotics on top of that. And an offshoot of that is that beautiful sour smell and flavor that you get. I mean, you can't get that from a regular yeasted bread. That's the fermentation. Oh, it smells good, it tastes good. Also, sourdough bread is lower on the glycemic index, so it's better for your blood sugar, which I wasn't really aware of. I think that's really interesting. So it's a better bread to eat if that is something you're worried about or dealing with. Don't let anybody tell you that freshly milled flour can't make a good sourdough. It absolutely can. I am so excited to share with you today tips, tricks, things that I have learned over time working with freshly milled flour and just learning sourdough in general. I hope that my research helps you. I'm really excited to share this with you. And there is so much information out there, and there's so much to this process. If I leave anything out, if you have any questions, please ask me and I will answer. I have so many things I want to say. I'm afraid I'm going to leave something out or not say it as clearly. So please ask me and I will explain it better. Because I've done the sourdough starter video and this, I might forget that I've said something in one video and not say it. So I'm excited to share this with you. I am really passionate about making good food with whole, freshly milled flour. So I want you to have the best go that you can. So if I miss something or if I'm unclear, I fully apologize. It's because I'm excited and I have 1,000 things going around in my mind and I want to show you everything so neat, that it's so good and that you can do it, that this is so simple. I've seen so many videos that just complicate it and make me want to quit, and it does not have to be that way. We can do all kinds of things. So in my fervor and zeal, I may forget something or not be clear. Let me know and I will clear it up for you. So let's get baking. Okay, before baking, I wanted to share, so this is the starter that we've been building together, and I fed it this morning, so it's not rising yet. But when it is ready, and it's been I think it took us 6 days this time to build a good, healthy, active, lovely sourdough starter. So we have this brand new baby starter ready to go. This is fit and active, ready to be used. I mean, not this, it's not at its highest point yet, but this starter that we built together is fit to make bread with. So you have a recipe you want to make. So you need to think ahead of time about how much starter you're going to need for your recipe. No matter how much starter you need, you feed it a few times to get it to be the volume you need for your recipe. You need to make sure every single time before you start taking it out to put into your bread, you take at least 30 grams. You can do whatever you want. For me, 30 grams works great. I take 30 grams, give it a feed. If I'm not going to be making sourdough bread for a while, I'll put it in the refrigerator and not think about it for a week. If I'm going to use it the next day and I need to feed it some more to grow it for the next day or whatever, then I leave it on the counter. But make sure every time you're going to bake, you put aside in your original container or something else 30 grams of starter so that you always have your starter base. This is technically called, because we have to name everything something different and make it confusing, this is your mother. It's what you take out of or build it to take out of what you're going to use in your bread. So the mother is the base, your original, your OG starter, and you keep this all the time. We feed it, get it big, take out of it. You're going to need more than just that, so you feed it again, make it larger, grow the volume. Keep 30 grams of your mother, of your original starter, somewhere. Okay, I've said that every way I can. Sorry. So this recipe calls for 1.5 to 2 cups of sourdough starter. I'm going to use 2 cups. So I started with, we had 150 grams because we did 50 starter, 50 flour, 50 water. That's what I started with. I put 30 to the side. So I started doubling that until I got the volume that I wanted to have enough for this bread recipe. All you do is just feed it its exact weight. You can feed it 150 grams of flour, 150 grams of water directly into your container with your 150 grams of starter. And then, oh, all of a sudden you have 450, and then you build from there however much you're going to need. Or if you want to use cups, use cups, 1/8 a cup to a 1/4 a cup, whatever. So I built that, and this is what it looks like, and we'll do close-ups. I'll kind of go through it with close-ups because it's neat. It's really cool. It's alive, and you built it. We built this together, and this is live active starter that's going to raise our bread, leaven our bread. All the words we can use to say it's the yeast for our bread. But I just think it's really neat. So before we start adding in ingredients, I just wanted to talk about that briefly. And I always try and keep the bubbles in so I can show you what it looks like, because it's really pretty when you kind of move sourdough starter around. All those bubbles start popping, and it's really pretty. Okay, this recipe I've adjusted, so I think I can share it with you without breaking any legal notices. I got it out of a Mennonite cookbook from a Mennonite community that have been doing sourdough forever, and they do everything from freshly milled flour, because as we've talked about, sourdough on its own, is one thing. Sourdough with freshly milled flour is a whole nother ballgame. Just like regular bread with regular yeast that we've been doing. Making bread is one thing. Making it with freshly milled flour is quite another thing, right? We just have a couple more steps to make it a little bit easier and better for us. We know everything we do is worth it because we get all of the nutrients and all of the fiber and all the good stuff we get to have. And as we have learned, freshly milled flour makes a much better sourdough starter, so we're going to have better bread regardless. So many different reasons. So one thing we're going to do to make sure that we get the best outcome, we take a little bit of extra time and do another step just to help us out. We know that we have, with a wheat berry, the extra hull. It's the harder bit on the outside, and we have germ and fiber that's just not in regular flour. That, as it's rising, can actually cut into strands of gluten and cause you not to get that rise you want. And we're going to get great tasting bread, but very dense bread. So one thing we're going to do to alleviate that is add in all of the ingredients but the salt and most of the flour. But as we're watching it knead, we're going to add flour in slowly to get to the point where we say, yes, this is right. Mix it in a little bit, and we're just going to let it sit for 15 to 20 minutes. So prepare this time in your schedule as you're making your bread. We're just going to let everything soak and get nice and soft, and then we're going to start kneading the bread and getting that gluten building. This process of soaking everything is called an autolyse. It really does help regular bread, but for us in general, in using the freshly milled flour, it's kind of a necessity for us to get everything soft and ready to be kneaded. Okay, we're going to add 2 cups of warm water, no more than 110 degrees. How do we help sourdough move a little quicker? Everything should be warm, not hot. If you need it to take longer, then you have everything colder. We're going to add what essentially is 6 tablespoons of oil. So that's 1/4 cup and 1/8 cup. I'm just going to do 3 1/8 cup because it's dirtying less dishes. Next, we're going to do honey granules. It's the same amount. We're going to do 3 1/8 cups. There's an ingredient, it's malted barley flour. This just helps give the yeast something to feed on. Also, it is completely optional. I just happened to find a sale on it on Azure, so don't feel like you need it. And they only ask for 1/2 teaspoon. This is our fed and grown sourdough starter. You saw from the side the bubbles, so I just kind of wanted to show you how pretty it is. The original recipe says 3/4 cup. I find I need a whole cup, and everything I do is doubled, so 2 cups. So look at how beautiful that is. Look at all of the bubbles in there. There's just something about sourdough, knowing you grew it, you started it, you fed it, you've babied it. So I have my original starter saved, the mother. This I'm going to use and make some sourdough crackers with. So whatever you use, you don't have to throw away. You can use in pancakes or whatever. There's a million different starter discard recipes. So I will be using this. And they make the most delicious sourdough crackers. You know, the flour varies. Well, with sourdough, it's even more so, it varies. This recipe, the original, is between 2 and 4 cups of flour. 2 and 4 cups of flour. That's a lot of variance. So I know I'm usually around 6 cups for a double recipe. So I'm going to put in 4 cups of flour slowly. And if anything funny happens, I can take care of it as we go. But let's just add it in. And for this recipe, we're just doing a basic sandwich dough, like a basic white sandwich dough. So I'm just using hard white wheat. we can get into adding in all kinds of things, you know, rye to give it a good flavor. But for our basic first sourdough together, we're just going to go simple. Okay, you see it started to pull away from the sides. This is still too moist, but when it starts to pull away from the side, I say, okay, I'm gonna let this rest and auto-lease. I'm gonna let all of the bran and the germ and everything get really soaked in. We're gonna give everything time to moisten itself. So we're gonna leave this for 15 minutes. So I'm just gonna cover it up. As we cover it, we allow it to stay in its nice warm environment. I've got a fan going on, so it's blowing cold air. So I'm gonna cover that to keep it nice in its own little cocoon. I know that I could use the lid to this, but then I'd have to take everything off, and I don't want to. So I'm just gonna cover and then set a timer for 15 minutes. So while this is auto-leasing, I'm going to, I don't even know if that's the word, auto-leasing? We'll see. While it's hydrating, I wanted to explain the next step. So obviously, when you have all your ingredients, we're making bread, the next step is kneading. So when we make our regular everyday loaf with yeast, it's, you know, 8 minutes of kneading or thereabout, you know, somewhere in between. With sourdough, with the freshly milled flour, we need to knead a lot. And you're gonna feel like you're gonna mess this up, but there are signs to show you when it's done, and we'll show everything. I just wanted to say it first. So when you knead it, when you can pull on your dough ball and a chunk of it comes off, if it breaks off really easy, you're nowhere near done. What we're looking for is a elastic, smooth, moist looking. It's gonna look more moist than it should. Like if you touch it, you're gonna pull your hand away and there'll be a lot of dough on it. But when you do, everything we do, we're gonna do with our hands, you know, we're gonna look at it, we're gonna feel it, we're gonna smell it, we're gonna, you know, use all of our senses almost. And make sure that it's where it needs to be. So it's gonna look moist, and we're gonna be able to pinch into it and pull it, and it's gonna become very elastic. When it's elastic, then we're ready to let it do its first rise. This can take 20 minutes of kneading. Honest to goodness, 20 to 25 minutes even of kneading. I don't know. I know for a fact that you can over knead something, but you're not going to. If you're keeping an eye on it, you keep trying to pull it and see if it's gonna rip off really easy, or just do a little stretch and then rip off, then you're part of the way there. Then you're gonna be able to really pull on it and see the elasticity. You're gonna see the moist dough ball. You're gonna see what it looks like. You're gonna feel what it looks like, but it takes time. I don't think you're gonna knead it so much that all the gluten breaks down and it turns into mush. So just let it go, and know, again, you're gonna have ups and downs when you're making sourdough for the first time, but give it more time than you think in the beginning. Don't just cut it short and say, oh, that's probably enough. Everything we do, there's a reason for it. It takes time. Sourdough just takes time. The extra time it's gonna take to do these steps, like auto-leasing for 15 minutes, kneading for 20 minutes. Okay, we're already a big chunk into our day, right? But it's worth it, and there's reasons why we do it. So I know I'm repeating myself, but I want you to understand why we need to do this. Okay, after 15 minutes of the hydrating the flour, the auto-lease soaking, we're gonna turn this on, but we can see it's sticky. You know, this is not dough ready to rise yet, obviously. So from this point on, I've added 5 cups of flour. The recipe calls for 4 to 8. So that's a big variance. So what we're gonna do is let this run and add things very, very slowly, because we can always add a little more in, we cannot take it out. And it makes a really big difference having a dense loaf or a light and fluffy loaf, you know, with the right amount of flour, obviously. So we're gonna be very careful from this point on, use our eyes, use our hands, and watch it. I have a 6 I'm going to add this very slowly. About a fourth a cup at a time. Tablespoon of salt. I forgot. Good heavens. Okay, so we've let it knead 8 minutes so far. So let's see. Can I stretch it far? Nope, it wants to break off. It stretches a little bit. I still need a little bit more flour, but then I just wanted to show you, if you try and pull it and it comes off in chunks, then it's nowhere elastic enough for what we need. So I'm going to keep adding flour little by little. Okay, we're at 16 minutes of kneading, and let's see, there is a lot more stretch, still needs more kneading. We've so far added 6 1/4 cups of flour, and I think we're close to enough. It is still sticky, but you can feel it's a fuller dough. So I might add maybe 1/4 cup more to be total 6 1/2 cups. But we're going to just keep letting it knead, because we've got a good stretch, but it's not quite there yet. I'd rather err on this side of a little bit less flour, so it's a little bit more sticky. That's okay. But we're going to certainly knead until we have a bit more stretch. Okay, I've stopped my watch a couple of times talking to y'all, so it's almost 24 minutes. I'll say it's 23 minutes. Let's check. Look at that. That's stretching. Look at that. That's a beautiful stretch there. Now, this dough, no matter what, it's going to be a little sticky. That's good. We want a moist, glossy, elastic dough. Every time you make sourdough, it's going to be a little bit different knead time, so don't get frustrated. Look for the sign. Congratulations! You have just accomplished the hard part of this. Now the rest of it is the waiting game. You have started your starter. You have fed your starter to be the right volume. You have done the auto lease and let everything soak and hydrate. You have now slowly and methodically added in all your ingredients and your flour little by little to where you think you're going to go insane. So, woo! You've done it. Now all we have to do is check on rising. Or when you're making sourdough, we don't call it rising, we call it fermenting. Or you can have a bulk ferment. People say it's your first rise when you're letting the sourdough and the yeast do all of their munching on the goodness and passing through the good probiotics and the CO2 to let things raise. And the longer that you let that go, the stronger your sour flavor is going to be. You have to let it go long enough you can get the rise. You can once you get them in your loaf pans, put them in the fridge overnight and let them ferment overnight. Totally doable for a more sour flavor. If you're a little bit gluten intolerant or you're making this for somebody who's sensitive to gluten, the longer it ferments, the more it eats of the yeast, which I think it's 75 to 97% less gluten in sourdough because it's eaten by all these good yeasts and bacteria. So the longer you let it ferment or rise, the more it's going to eat. But we're going to do this basic way together, and then you can change it from here how you want to go. Now, no matter what you do, this dough is going to stick to your hands just a little bit, which is wonderful. It needs to be moist, okay? So let me get this out. So what I do, we spray. I'm going to divide this into 2 bowls just because that's what I do. You can let it rise in one, whatever you want to do. I'm just sticking to what I know. So I'm going to spray this with some olive oil. I'm going to spray my hands with olive oil because it'll be a lot easier once you're dealing with this. Oh, all be excited, smile, celebrate with yourself. This is amazing. Look at this dough. This is beautiful, beautiful dough. It is so smooth, it is elastic. You have done an amazing job. Everything is incorporated beautifully, and we've got the lovely, lovely stretch that we love to have with sourdough. Yay you. So, spray your other bowl if you're using 2. We're gonna just eyeball this in half because at this point it doesn't matter. Coat with oil. Okay, then we're gonna cover them. We're gonna put them in an oven that's warm. No baking yet. I just have the light on in my oven, so it's been warming up. Now, this is the patience part. With regular bread, we can say, let rise an hour or until doubled in volume. Doubled in volume here, we don't even have to get to doubled at this point. We'll focus on that when they're in the loaf pans. We want to get to a round, doubled in volume. This could take 3 hours. It could take 4 hours. It depends on the kind of year of flour, the wheat berries that you had. It depends on how cold your oven is. It depends on maybe your sourdough starter is just in a off season and it's just a little slow to activate. It could be that you have a new starter like we just started. That tends to take a little bit longer to really eat through all of the goodness that's in there and do its job of making CO2 to make things rise, right? Older, more established starters do that a little bit quicker because they have all those good strains of bacteria that have lasted the test of time. Do not get discouraged. If you check on this in an hour and it looks like nothing happened, don't worry. You just have to wait longer. If you check it in 3 hours and nothing's really happening, maybe we're going to fix some problems. But it's not going to be this rise like regular bread. And it's not going to be this rise as if we use the dead flour, the all-purpose white flour that doesn't have the goodness in it that we know. This is not going to look the same, and that's okay. It will rise. You've done a great job up to now. Just be patient. So I've let these rise about 2.5 hours. They have certainly risen, not like you would see in the regular yeast dough. But this dough feels so good. I'm going to divide them equally to 2 loaves. So a tip or a trick that I would offer you is for sourdough, you want to have a real tight loaf when you put it in your pan. You want to build up some tension. So all I really do is just kind of roll it towards me where the bottom is catching, so it's gathering tension, and then roll it over, tuck it in on itself, kind of roll it over, roll it towards me. So basically we're causing it to get tighter as it's rolling. and then I'll turn it around and I'll roll it. So this is stretching and catching, so the tension is building here. This helps with the gluten stretching and filling with the CO2 that's the offshoot of the bacteria and the yeast. So really just try and build some tension. And I'm using my USA pans, so I don't need to line them with anything, but you can pre-grease or put in parchment paper, whatever you need. So we're taking the loose dough, just kind of roll it up a little bit, and then we're gonna pull it towards you. So you see you're pulling it, the tension is coming underneath, and you just kind of roll it on top, turn it, do the same thing. It's funny, my mind knows what I want to tell you, but my words are getting jumbled, so I hope you understand. We just want nice, taut dough here. So we're going to let these at least get to the top of the pan. That's however much time it takes, so don't get frustrated if it takes a long time. It takes the time it takes. We have baby yeast here, baby starter, and sourdough in general just takes a little bit longer. So don't worry about the time as much as letting it get to at least the top of your pan, so that then when we bake it, it's going to rise even more. So I'm going to pop these in the oven and I'll be back. Okay, as you can see, it is nighttime. It's 10 o'clock. Usually I would just say, you know what, these haven't risen as much as I'd like them to, and I would just put them in the fridge to bulk ferment and then finish filming tomorrow. So I wasn't happy with that, and I redid them, same recipe, and I'm going to explain at the end what went wrong and how I fixed the problem. But I wanted to show you what they should look like, and these overproofed a little bit, so they're a little bit wonky. But so lovely bread. Look at the texture. It's so soft. Happy loaf. You will notice the scenes change a little bit. So I wanted to explain, when I showed you the bread in the loaf pan, and I said these just didn't rise, but I'm gonna bake them anyways, and then you don't see those pans baked. I had the toughest week, and I had a very humbling experience. You saw they didn't look quite right, and I knew they didn't look quite right, and I was very frustrated, and I didn't know what to do. I baked them, and they didn't do anything. They were flat. You know, something wasn't right. Even when you mess up, they still taste pretty good. They're just very dense. I didn't want to show them and say, okay, well, this is, you know, not how it should be, but here you go. So I said, I'm not going to put the video out. I'm going to fix this. And I could not figure out what I did wrong, because I have made sourdough. I'm good at making sourdough, and they turned out poorly, and I didn't want to give you that. So the next day, I fed my starter, got it all ready. The next day, made the bread. The same thing happened. And I'm at a loss, and I'm upset because I've just wasted ingredients, because it's not what I want. I tell you very clearly, I'm not a professional, but I hope that I can bring you exciting recipes, and I can explain them in a way that's, you know, helpful. And, you know, I'm just doing my best and want to share healthy, good bread with you, with good, freshly milled flour and all the nutrients, and, you know, my whole spiel. And so twice now, I made the sourdough bread and it didn't turn out. And so now I'm mad, right? Because we get frustrated with ourselves. And I took a whole day and was feeding my starter again, baked them, or made the same recipe. And this is all the same exact thing, right? The same exact thing. And they were flat again. And I almost was in tears, because I'm like, what am I doing wrong? And I have texted and called my mom, you know, I called Jesse. So my husband was in Florida doing a work trip, and so he was on the beach having the time of his life, sending pictures of the water. The girls are excited. asking for him to bring shells home, you know, and I'm trying to be happy for him, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing wrong. I know how to make bread, you know. 3 times I made the bread and it failed. So for me, that's 6 loaves that I've wasted ingredients, and we know how precious and expensive. Now I've done that 6 times in a row. But you know what they say about insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting, you know, different results. So I just started praying, and I was at my wit's end, and I'm like, I know I can bake bread. I don't know what's wrong. God help me. I don't know what's going on. You know, I'm just like back and forth. And all of a sudden, when I finally got over my ego and myself, I think the Lord allowed to pop into my head, if you've made the same recipe all this time before and it's been great, and now you're making it again and it's not, what's different? You know, the recipe is the same. The method is the same. Do you know what I did that was so frustrating? But I wanted to talk to you about it because we're real people, we're real bakers, we have real things. I baked a lot in the winter, and my biggest concern, because our house, like, it's climate controlled, but not as much. In the winter it's very cold, and in the summer it's very warm in our house. I worried so much about keeping my bread warm that I made it the same way. So now it's summertime, or almost summertime, it's 100-degree days here, and my house is hot. I put it in the warm oven with the light on in an already hot house, and my oven's already warm. I pretty much cooked the top layer of the dough. When I did that, all of the sourdough property that makes the yeast in it that makes it rise, it couldn't rise. It was hitting a brick wall because I had made that layer on top, and it couldn't do anything. So it just fought itself and died. So I was warming it too much. I was so worried about it staying warm enough, I messed up. That's what changed. It's summer, it's not winter. So now, if you're in a warmer environment, I can say to you, I just left it on top of my stove with no heat. I got a tea towel. You've seen me use tea towels. I moistened it so it's not wet. Like, I could wring it, nothing would drip off. It was just moist. I put it over both of those. I have these giant Ziploc bags. I got it at Walmart, I think. All I did was slide the loaf pans in here, and with the tea towels on. I didn't seal it or anything. We have fans going, so I didn't want air to be blowing on it. And I just left them on my stove to rise. And that solved the problem. It kept the top of it moist, so everything in there was good moist dough, and it was able to grow how it was supposed to. So it took about 4 hours of the first rise that you do in the bowls. I had put the moist towel over that, put it in here, and it rose for about 4 hours. Great. So then I put it into the 2 bread tins that you see, and they rose for, I think, 3 hours, maybe 3.5. I think it was 3 hours, as it's a whole day process. I baked at 350 for 35 minutes, and that's it. 350, 35 minutes, beautiful, fluffy sourdough bread. Now, my husband was gone. He is the one, he is such a wonderful man. He sets up our lights. He sets up the camera tripod. He sets up everything so the lighting is just right. I unfortunately am not, I don't know how to do that. I'm usually tidying up, or, you know, the girls and I are making it look nice, or I'm getting ready, and I just walk out and get to do the video because he takes care of me, and I'm so blessed. So you suffer the consequences of that when he's not here. I just kind of did a video on it. So it wasn't great lighting, but that is it. You know, I actually think I let it rise a little bit too long, because you saw the top of it was a little wonky in the video. It wasn't just your smooth dough. I think I let it rise too much, and as it baked, it deflated a little bit, which can happen with your regular commercial yeast bread. If you let it rise too much, overproofing will have it sink down and be a little wonky. That's what I did. So that's why the bread isn't perfect. Usually I can get a nice, beautiful loaf. I didn't think I needed to do a whole nother video. One, because I couldn't do all the lights, and it's the same exact recipe. I make it the same exact way as I did in the video. So if you bake along with me, it is the same thing. The dough looked the same because there was nothing wrong with the dough. It was me and how I proved it, how I let it rise, or bulk ferment. When you do sourdough, you say ferment. So I want you to know I'm not being shady or trying to trick you with anything. It's the same recipe, the same dough you saw go into the bowl for the first rise. It's the same. I just showed you how I fixed it from me heating it too much in the rising process. That is my fault. I did that. And then I did it 3 more times and got so frustrated, and then finally did what I should have did in the first place and calmed down, prayed about it, removed myself from what went wrong, and say, okay, what changed? Because I know it's a good recipe, and therein is the answer. So I wanted to tell you, so you didn't think I was doing a bait and switch or anything like that. I love to be honest with y'all, because maybe you're going to run up against the same problem. Maybe your problem is opposite and it just won't rise, but there's no crust on top or film on top, and it's just because it's not warm enough in your oven. And we know if it's not warm enough, even with the light on, you can put a bowl of boiling water and just put it on the bottom of your oven, and it's going to create some warmth in there for you. You know, we did that this winter and figured out how to solve the opposite problem of it being too cold. So learn from my mistakes. I'm happy to do it for you. By the way, it was so good and sour and so delicious. It is a wonderful recipe. So don't let my mistake keep you from making the recipe. It is so, so good. You will really enjoy it. So I am so excited to share sourdough with you and show you how good it can be, and also mistakes that go along with that. So I want you to know I'm so grateful for y'all and all your comments, and just being with me when we make bread together. And I want you to know I am praying for you, I am thankful for you, and I will see you next week.